I said that, God talks about several trees in the Bible. He talks about the juniper tree that Elijah went and hid under. He talks about the sycamore tree that Zacchaeus climbed up in. He talks several times about fig tree. It talks about olive trees. And trees are kind of important, and there's a lot of good illustrations. A tree and us, roots, branches, leaves, protection, all this different stuff. And we talked about last week that our tree that we are, that's our life, that we plant this tree and we grow it. And sometimes we look at our tree and we say, well, it's just not a big tree. It's not an important tree. It's not like their tree. They have this, look at their tree. And God doesn't do that at all. He says, whatever tree he gives you, whatever life he gives you, whatever job he gives you to do, it is the most important thing to him. There's nothing unimportant about any of us or what we do. It doesn't, what we think is important that doesn't mean anything. Everything's important to God. We're important to God. And so we need to understand that that's what God's given us. Let's give all to it. And let's don't be comparing them. Let's don't look at somebody else's stuff because, it doesn't have any relevance. What God's given me is what God's given me, and it's the most important thing I could possibly have. If I had something that was somebody else's, I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't do anything with it. It's not mine. So we need to understand none of us have. If, I'm assuming, if we looked at my tree, it'd probably be like this little Charlie Brown tree. And that's okay. I love Charlie Brown trees. When Sarah and I used to go out and get a Christmas tree, sometimes we would look for, Tyler loved to do it. We'd look for the worst, scraggliest, ugliest little tree and get that and decorate it and love it, because it's not about the tree. It's about the thought being all the other stuff. And so it was just kind of a fun thing. So the second part I want to talk about here is kind of the second part of the verse, is that we have to keep our fig tree. That word keep is really big. But the thing is, God doesn't look at the results. He's not looking at the tree itself. He wants to know what kind of effort we're going to put in taking care of our tree, taking care of whatever he's given us, whether it's large or small. He's not looking at it to see how many figs it produces. He just wants to know how much effort we put into taking care of whatever he's given us. That's what he looks at. Okay, the thing is, the effort belongs to us. The results belong to God. God is going to do what God is going to do. But the effort is what we put into it. The results are not ours. The effort is ours. The results belong to God. And we're supposed to keep our tree. And in this sense, the illustration I'm using, our tree is our heart. Proverbs 4:23, it says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. We use it all the time, talking about what's in our heart is going to come out. But the important part I want to talk about here is that word. It says, keep thy heart. That's what we're supposed to do. God says, I will create in you a clean heart if you ask me for it. I will give you all this stuff, but your job is to take care of it. He said, I'll do it for you. I'll give you what you can't get yourself, but you better take care of it. You better keep it. And to keep is to watch over or guard, preserve, to nurture, all those things. We're to make sure, among other things, that only good things go into our heart. That's part of our job. We're supposed to pick and choose what goes into our heart. We're to make sure that nothing good that's in there leaves. If we don't use something for a period of time, it atrophies, it goes away. A little Maya in the hospital, she's so weak right now because she's not used her muscles in almost a month. She's just laying there. She hadn't been able to get up, to walk, to do anything. So when one of the things that she's going to have to do when she gets out of the hospital is to have physical therapy to start retraining her muscles because she hasn't been using it. The stuff that we put into our heart, we need to use it. It's not enough just to have it laying there. It'll grow mold and dust and all that, and it'll wither up. We have to use what's in our heart. Okay? We have to make sure that nothing good leaves our heart. We have to guard against bad things getting in our heart. Okay, not only make sure that good things get in, but we can't let bad things in. Well, my son, cease to hear the instruction of those that are going to take you where you're not supposed to be. I kind of paraphrased the last of that one. It's our the little song, and we make fun of it, careful little eyes what you see, be careful little ears what you hear. Yes, that's for us. That's adults too. We're so casual about what we allow in. I know I am many times. We're just so casual about what we allow into our ears, to our eyes. The things we're just so casual about it. It's not a big deal. We're inoculated against sin in so many ways. I can remember when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I dated. As a junior in high school, I was dating this girl that was like, she's pregnant. And it wasn't my child. It's a friend of mine's child, but he dumped her, so I dated her. She's a sweet kid. I loved her. But, people looked at me like, oh. And it wasn't true. It wasn't mine. But the thing was, it was a hard road for her. It was hard for her in high school. Pregnant. There wasn't any hiding that thing. She was a little small girl like my wife, and it was like, woo, like that. It wasn't like people didn't notice. And it was a stigma back then. Nowadays, it's not a big deal. Nowadays, it's like, oh, isn't that cool? And the only thing that's changed is people's attitude. We've become so, we see things so often, it's no big deal. Back when I was in high school, if somebody would have been openly gay, homosexual, oh my soul, that would not have been good for them. I think they probably would have got beat up and all the other stuff, but they certainly would have been ostracized. Nowadays, it's like, nowadays it's applauded even. So we got to be careful what we allow into our hearts. That we can't let the bad stuff in. It stays there. We need to continually be putting God's word into our heart. We need to be continually asking God to write on the tables of our heart. I love that thought of God coming in, and like I have this big wooden table, and he's got a hard stylus that he carves into the tabletop of my table, and it's there. It's permanently there. It's hard to get rid of. I'd have to sand and sand and sand to get that out. I like that. It's not like, the paper's laying there and the wind blows and it's gone. When God writes on the table of my heart, it's there. Now, I can ignore it and get rid of it, but I like that. And we need to ask him. Because God doesn't do that unless we ask. I hope you understand that. God doesn't just come in our heart and just put stuff in there. We have to ask him, please come into my heart. Please write this into my heart. Please help me remember this. Please help me to think about this all the time. I ask him that every morning. Before I read Proverbs, I read over in Psalms 119, and there's so much there, and it's like, open thou my eyes so I can see wondrous things out of thy word. And there's a verse right across from it in my Bible that help me to see the things of your commandments. Help me to understand. Help me to receive. Help me to hear all those things. I pray never for him to talk. I pray for me to listen. I pray for me to hear, for me to see, for me to understand. He doesn't have any issue with the giving. Y'all get that? There's never a problem with God giving. The problem's always with me receiving. So we constantly have to be asking God to do that. And as we keep our heart, as we do those things, we will become like that tree that's planted by the rivers of water. Now, I don't know if I said this last week, but it occurred to me last week. When I think of the tree by the water, I see a really big tree. But it didn't start, that tree didn't start as a really big tree. It only happened one time. That's when God created the universe. He created trees that were really big and smaller and smaller and smaller. He didn't create baby trees and they grew. He didn't create acorns and they grew into an oak tree. He created full-grown things. But then now, if I want to be that tree, that means at some time I had to be planted there. And pretty soon the little sprout came up, and the leaves came out and the sun shined on it. And somebody kept the deers from coming and eating my tender green, and I grew and I got bigger and I got watered and my tree grew. And so we're that tree planted there. And that means we need to grow. And we need to do what we need to do to grow. And for the illustration's purpose, we need to keep that little tiny tree. My poor dad, my dad loved to grow things. So we lived in Colorado, And people told him, they would tell him things like, oh, you can't grow oak trees here. So he'd say, okay, and he'd grow an oak tree. And so he got an acorn from the oak tree that grew in the yard that he grew up in Stillwater, Oklahoma. My grandmother lived there. And he planted it in a little pot and grew it, and he put it out in our front yard. And it started off as about 3 foot high, and I was mowing the lawn. And me and that oak tree had a lot of discussions because I'm just mowing, and if I run into this thing, that's no big deal to me. It's a big deal to my dad. He didn't appreciate that. And the oak tree didn't appreciate it either. If you go look at it right now, it's still in the yard. It's about this big around now. It's been growing for a long time. But there's places on the side of it down here that like little dents where the lawnmower ran into the side of it. Same with the tree that's over on the side of the yard. So we have to keep that tree. We have to protect that tree. Our heart, we have to make sure it's watered and protected from the things that are going to hurt it. And as we do that, the tree grows. Okay, and it's planted by the rivers of water there, and trees, they don't have to grow by a river because there's water there, but where there's water in the river, it soaks into the ground, and the roots of the tree go over, and they get the water, and that's where they get their water from. And that's important because when there's a drought, I mean, I can tell you, so many times I have so many pictures in my mind of Colorado. In Colorado, it is a semi-arid desert, if anybody knows what that means. Annual rainfall in Colorado is about 13.5 inches a year. We get that in like 2 days. It's not a big deal here. We get like 40 inches of rain, something here. But out there, there's just hardly any rain. And there'll be many times when everything is just brown, okay? And if a tree isn't planted where there's groundwater underneath the ground, the leaves will start to turn yellow and wither a little bit and die. But the tree that's planted by where the rivers of water are, even in the midst of a drought, those leaves stay healthy and green, because as the drought happens in the top part of the ground, the roots there's a mechanism that causes the roots to go down and down and down, seeking water. And one of the things that does is it makes the tree stronger because the roots go down to seek the water. The same with when there's a storm and the top of the tree is blowing around. It triggers a mechanism in the roots of the tree to cause those roots to go down, because if there's never any wind or anything, and if there's available surface water, the roots won't go down, they'll go sideways. And then when the storm happens, the tree just falls over because there's no depth on those roots. And so all those things combined, that's what we are. We're that tree. And that's what we need to do. You know, the droughts come and all these things happen. The hard times come, the storms happen. All that is good. That's part of God's plan. It causes our roots to grow deeper, to seek the water that is Jesus Christ, the living water that's down there. Okay? So trees need water. And when he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, verse before, when we delight in the law of the Lord and we meditate day and night, that's what causes us to grow. And we're like that tree. And as the tree grows, God puts the fruit on the vines. God grows his fruit on our tree. God grows his fruit on our tree. And that fruit is there for us, and that fruit is there for others. And as if the fruit falls and goes onto the ground, it has the seed in it, and another tree grows, kind of a rough illustration there. The fruit of a Christian is more Christians. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. I don't cause those things to grow in me. That's not from me. That's from God. And I have to take care of the tree, and he'll grow the fruit. I have to put the tree where the nutrients are, the Word of God, the Bible. He'll grow the fruit. Okay? Next thing here is, I got just a second left. The last part of that verse is really cool. And whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. Y'all want to prosper? Anybody here, I don't want to prosper. I just want to, whatever the opposite of prosper is. I don't exactly know. The question is, what does that word prosper mean, though? Because it doesn't mean money. Doesn't mean wealth. Doesn't mean possessions. It doesn't mean, it doesn't even mean security. It doesn't really mean health. What it means is God remaking us from the inside out. As God transforms us into the image of Christ, that's where we prosper. I was thinking of this, the play we just did. Corrie ten Boom's sister, Betsy. She was kind of a frail, this is a true story. Her sister Betsy, and they were fairly old when they got put in the concentration camp. She never complained about anything. She looked at everything as a blessing. It was amazing. She kept asking Corrie, you may have heard this line, may not have. They're in the concentration camp, and she would tell Corrie all the time, pray for the fleas. And so she'd pray for the fleas, and she's like, why are you asking me to pray for the fleas? That's horrible. The fleas are, who wants to sleep with fleas? It's horrible. I mean, it's terrible. And she said, don't you understand? Our barracks are so ridden with fleas that the guards will not come in. They never come in because they don't want to get fleas. And because they don't come in, we can openly read the Bible, discuss it, get people saved, see people saved, where we have the freedom in here because of those fleas. And they were the only barracks in the camp that had the problem with fleas, because I've read the book. And God put those fleas there because she had the Bible. And the way she got it in there too, if you saw, I don't know if you saw in the play, she literally just walked past the guards with the Bible, and it was like they were blind. Yeah. Because God wanted it in there. God took it in there. There was some really good stuff there. She just came to the understanding that it's not about what I do, it's what God wanted. Okay, this lady Betsy, she was prospering. She died in there. But if you'd have asked her, do you want anything? She just said, no, this is awesome. Get some more people to come in here so we can lead them to the Lord. She was doing exactly what God wanted her to do. She was exactly where God wanted her to be. And she was prospering where she was planted. Now, we don't look at that as prosperity. I understand, but it was. That's what real prosperity is. When she died, she had peace. She had contentment. She had done exactly what God asked her to do in the place He planted her, and she prospered. And that's what He wants from us. That's what that means right there. That's what we'll do if we'll take care of our tree. Doesn't matter where we're planted. Doesn't matter what our tree looks like. Doesn't matter how big it is. Doesn't matter what job we have. None of that. When we do what God wants us to do, when we take care of our tree and pour ourselves into whatever God's given us, we will prosper. Now, if God wants to give us cars and money and all that's great. But that's not the definition of prosperity. Prosperity is on the inside, not on the outside. And that's what this is talking about. And whatsoever He doeth shall prosper. That's not may. It's not might. It's it will. That's a promise from God. And again, we got to be careful because we look at it and say, well, look at where I'm homeless. I'm living in my car or whatever. I'm not prospering. Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not. It's not about where you live or what you have. It's about what you do with your fig tree, what you do where you're planted. That is prosperity. And if you're in that situation and you're prospering, you will know it. You will want for nothing. Seriously. I've heard a couple of people say, Chad used to say in his testimony, Chad Farley, he says when he got in jail, he went to jail, that's where he learned to walk with the Lord. He had structure, he had a good man mentoring him and talking to him, and he had the strongest walk with the Lord he'd ever had. And when he got out, he started to fall apart. And he realized, God kind of told him, said, look, son, if you don't take care of business, I'll put you back in the jail where you did grow. And he kind of had to come to Jesus meeting with himself and said, I really don't want to go back to jail. I better start taking care of this business. Because if God told him, if that's where you need to be for you to grow, I don't have a problem with you being there at all. Now, we look at that as a horrible thing. But he said that was where I grew the most. And so now he learned that wherever I'm at, I need to grow. Don't make God put you in a place like that, because if that's what he has to do, he will. And not, if that's what he needs to do, he will no matter what you want, but it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to wait till you reach rock bottom before you reach out to God. We do a lot of times, but you don't have to. Just do it right now. Prosper wherever you're at right now. All right, that's it. I got it.